John, what's wrong?
I'm stressed.
About what?
My money.
Well, you seem to have a lot of things. I would think that would make you happy.
No.
Have you ever wondered if maybe you're not happy because your spending and your values don't align?
Hmm. I never thought of that. How do I do that?
Listen to Queer Money episode 426 with our special guest, Adam Davis of Capital One, who shares how we can align them, plus manage our self care in our ongoing financial well being series.
All right, let's get on with the show then.
The mission of Queer Money is to financially empower the LGBTQ plus community. Join us in thanking Capital One for supporting that mission.
Welcome, Adam Davis, to the Queer Money Podcast. We're excited to have you.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
And as always, we tell our audience all the time, but we'd like to say it to as many Capital One people as we can face to face. Thank you for your continued sponsorship of the podcast. Capital One is the only reason the oldest show on LGBTQ finance is still in existence. So thank you very much for that.
Of course, it's our pleasure. It's great work.
Thank you. So we're going to dive into aligning your spending with your values today. So just for setting a baseline for our audience and for us, what does it mean to align your spending with your values?
Yeah, your values are really what is most important to you. So it's taking stock and taking a step back and trying to figure out, okay, these are the things that matter. And then getting an understanding of like, okay, I have so much money that I'm spending on different things. Is it really going to the things that matter most to you or not? And from a company perspective, like a Capital One, we also have values, and those align with our mission to change banking for good. And so our goal is like every day and everything that we are doing, that we are trying to make sure that we are allowing affordable access to the best products to our customers and our experiences. So it's when those two things come together where, as a consumer, the things that matter. And as a bank, we know the things, that matter to us that hopefully align with that we can kind of create the magic.
Actually, that's where I think the secret sauce is. So often, especially in our consumer society, like we're seeing all this like marketing and promotion of all these things and stuff that we are being told that we need, and then so often, like you look back at your expenses and you're like, wow, I didn't really enjoy that as much as it cost me. And then you just don't get the satisfaction out of your transactions that you would if you knew what was most important to you and you spent accordingly.
Yeah, that's right. And a lot of people don't take the time to take a step back and think about it because life's going on. It's crazy. You're just trying to keep up, and taking the time to be able to reflect is important. And let's give a couple examples. Like, let's say that you are somebody where you value wanting to have a really good time in retirement and to be set up well for retirement, and that matters to you way more than how you live today. And then maybe there's somebody else where you're in a place where what really matters to you is enjoying life and being able to reward the things that you were doing. Like the trade-offs that you would make around how you are spending your money could be incredibly different. If you're trying to focus on having a retirement later that you can really relax when you're done working, you're going to likely buy that used car, not a new car. If you're in the market for that, you're going to be able to look at a lot of choices and see if you can be more minimalistic now because your end goal. But if you're in the place where you're like, hey, like I really want to enjoy stuff now. I don't want to extend beyond my means, but I want to be able to have some of those, important pleasures that are out there. Like you're going to look at your money and you're going to say like, hey, did I go celebrate that thing that went really well? And I'm okay if I maybe have a little bit less money in a different spot.
So, do you think that aligning your spending and your values is something that happens by accident or naturally? Or do you think that we need to be more intentional about it?
I think that some of it will happen accidentally. But what happens is when you get into a place where you're not intentional, you're not going to be able to optimize kind of where you ultimately want to be, right? Like if you enjoy something, it's important to you, you're probably already doing more of that and you're going to spend. But if you're not looking back and saying like, what is my whole picture of where I'm spending my money? you might realize you have a significant amount of money going to things that you don't care about as much. And then that's an opportunity to be able to, depending on your values, like, oh, maybe I could save that money. Maybe I could actually spend more on the things that I like, a lot. And if you don't have a view into what that picture looks like, it's hard for you to make that choice. And if you don't know what's important to you, then how do you even look at that view and be able to put those things, together?
Exactly. This is why I love that exercise that Jean Chatzky shared with us last year on the Career Money podcast when she came on to promote her latest book. And that was to go back through all of your expenses over the last couple of months and then grade that expense on sort of a happiness scale of 1 through 5. How happy in hindsight does that transaction make you feel? And that'll help you figure out what your values are versus where you're spending your money that's actually not providing you with the ROI that you're hoping it would give you.
That's right. And it's also a great opportunity for you to figure out if you're spending, if there's places where the active banking is costing you more money than it otherwise would. Like, so at Capital One, like one of our key focuses again is like, how do we create the best, like affordable, easy, to use products? Like, we don't want to have the fees. We have our 360 checking product with no overdraft fees. We have our 360 performance savings that has, competitive interest rates. And so if you're able to find, products that allow you to keep more money for yourself so that you can kind of put it towards the things that value. Like, again, that's just another level of that optimization of the, hey, how do I even have more things aligned towards what matters?
Absolutely.
So is that what money values are? When we say that we have, we all have our own regular values, right? We value family, we value community, we value safety and security, but
wine, we value wine.
I think if you look at our budget, we value wine. What does it mean to have money values then?
Yeah, I mean, they're not completely distinct. You really would want to start with the values that you just talked about. Take wine as an example if you want, as something that's important to you. But where it intersects is some of the things that are really important to you don't actually cost money, right? Like, if something that's really important to you is time with family, maybe that costs money for some activities you're doing, but that doesn't necessarily have to have a large expense. Some of the things like wine cost money. And so you have to, the money values is that intersection of like, start what's really important to you in the first place and figure out which of those things cost you money, and then figure out how you're allocating that different amount as you get through. And look, everybody is in a different situation, and that situation can evolve. Sometimes you have discretionary income. Sometimes, you're in a place where you're just trying to get by, paycheck to paycheck. And as you're walking through that, like having visibility online into what you're spending, and then being able to go back to your values to say like, hey, when I do have that extra money, here's where I want to spend it. When I don't, let's make sure I can cover the things I need to.
Yeah, but I think the secret in there that's so hard for many of us, and we fall prey to this even today, is being conscious about that. Assessing what it is that you're doing when you're actually in the moment. Like last night we went out for tacos. It was Taco Tuesday. It was a discount. It was supposed to be cheaper. And then we didn't really pay attention to exactly what the margaritas were going to cost. And when we got the bill, we were like shocked.
Oopsie.
And those margaritas weren't really even that good. But there's a level of intention that you have to be put into your everyday decision making, and specifically your transactions when it comes to your finances, and being aware of what it is you're engaging with, and how that's providing you value, if at all.
Right. I also appreciate that you bring up this idea of looking at our values and then asking how can we do that in a cost-effective manner, because the reality is that it's very easy to get lured into, well, the only way that we can have fun as a family is to spend $600 on a ski trip, or to go out to a $200 dinner, or to, whatever there's a whole list of things to do. But there are so many options out there where we can have that family fun enjoyment and not spend as much money. And actually, I would say that to some degree, there are certain activities that are on the cheaper side that actually end up being more fun because you're actually spending more time with the people that you love.
Yeah, that's right. It's about the experiences. And to your point, like, you don't have to always put money into that. And I think there's even the things that do cost money, there's always trade-offs around the how much you're going to spend. Am I going to get one drink or two drinks if I'm out to dinner? And but to that intentionality, it's a good practice to think about, like, every month, for example, like, I'm going to look at my credit card statement. I'm going to look at my bank statement. I'm going to look at that online through the tools like Capital One has to be able to do that, and just categorize, like, hey, here's where I spent my money. Does that surprise you? If it does surprise you that you did it, that probably means that there's something that's misaligned with kind of where you thought you should be spending your money, and that leads back to your values.
So let's dive into that. When you say, look at my Capital One bank statement, sometimes that's a stressful time. I kind of have an idea that I was a little bit spendy last month. So, and money can evoke a lot of negative emotions for people already anyway, right? So a lot of us are bringing a lot of baggage from childhood into our adulthood when it comes to finances. So how can we think and talk about money in such a way as to reduce our stress and maybe even increase my confidence with my money?
Especially if you have to involve someone else in that discussion.
Right. It's not just one of you.
Yeah, right. It can be such a stressor as you go through, and that's where, as I mentioned before, like, if you can find products and services that allow the money to work for you a little bit harder, like, that's the first way to reduce the stress, because you at least know that you have more of your money that you can spend on the things that you either have to spend it on or that you need to. But what I think, when you think about the connection between the values and how you speak about money with this, let's use the example you just did of you could do a $200 dinner, or you could spend time with your family. A analogous version of that is a friend wants to catch up with you, and they want to go to this really expensive restaurant, to catch up. And you're afraid to be able to say, like, I can't afford that, or I don't want to, like, spend the money on that. And right now you don't really have a framework to have that conversation. It's either like, hey, I'm just not going to go because I'm not going to do it, or I'm going to feel embarrassed because, like, I'm going to say that I can't do that. If part of your values are, like, you're spending your money somewhere else and you have a reason to do that, you can now approach that conversation with the, hey, I'd love to get together with you. Right now, as I'm thinking about where I want to spend my money, like, I'm focused on these things. Like, I'd love to go do it somewhere else, like, if that's okay with you. And it helps bridge the conversation in a way that it's not just about the, like, I don't want to spend the money. Like, no, here's what's important to me, and maybe that doesn't align with what's important to someone else. But one thing we have to remember is that no two people are like. People have different values in terms of in general, and people have different values in terms of, like, their money. And so just because one person has more money than the other, or values something differently, like, the values can just be that bridge to be able to have that conversation in a trustworthy way.
Yeah, I love that you say that, because we're new to Toledo, Toledo, Ohio, and we're trying to make friends. And some newer friends of ours invited us to do something a couple of weeks ago, and we got back to them and said, thanks for the invite. This is not really aligned with our values right now, and it's a little bit outside of our budget for this type of an expense. We're trying to acquire some more real estate, so we're gonna decline this particular invitation, but keep us in mind for another one, and let's get together in a couple of weeks. And the response back was, you guys are so focused on your goals. My partner and I have to start talking to you more. So younger me would have been a little bit, like, scared going into that and saying, David and I are more focused on this rather than that. But older me was a little more confident, and it came back in such a positive way. The guy's like, we need to do that too. So the next time we get together, we're going to talk about investing and real estate investing specifically. So it sounds scary to people, but it actually, in actuality, is I think people want to hear that message, especially in today's culture, because as we're seeing all the numbers that are coming out, credit card balances are going up, credit scores are going down. Everybody's kind of, I think, a little bit feeling a little bit anxious about their particular finances and the economy overall. So when somebody comes in and says, this is in line with our financial values or our goals, that's like a breath of fresh air, I think, to people.
Right. And you bring up a good point that being prepared to have those kinds of conversations, right? So do you already have an idea of somewhere, an alternative place that you would suggest going? Say that you have your own list of, these are places I'd love to go to. They align more with my financial values right now. Would one of those be okay? And then I think more often than not, when we extend an invitation to folks or accept an invitation and we don't have any intention behind it, we gravitate towards places where we just feel good being at, and those sometimes are the more expensive places.
Yeah.
That's so true.
So I think a great way to figure out what your values are and to be able to be prepared in a proactive way to have those kinds of conversations when somebody throws an idea out at you is to sort of figure out what your values are. And that is maybe through the Capital One Money and Life program that David and I have taken several times that we highly recommend other people take. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, the Capital One Money Life program is great. It really starts with that broad view of what are your goals in life, and then starts to connect to that. What are your different financial steps that you're going to take to be able to help you towards those goals? So you have a mentoring session one-on-one with a coach that will help you if you haven't spent as much time thinking about that. Go through the process to help think and find what those goals are that are important. But then more importantly, on the other side of that is then saying, what steps can you take and how do you practice and how do you get to the place that you can start to be successful in achieving that? And so it's a great opportunity to really just be able to take that step back, think through the values, and do it on a one-on-one, no pressure way that's completely free. Really just meant to help you be able to think through this.
Right. And I think one of the things that John and I loved about this when we did it, and folks, for those of you who are listening, the question that we get from a lot of you is, how do I get on the same page financially with my partner? This is a great place to start. We always encourage people to start talking about what's important to you, where you see your hopes and dreams, the stuff that's not money specifically related. And that's the nice thing about your program is it doesn't have anything to do with numbers. It has more to do with what you value and where you see your life going.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the most important place to start. And we wouldn't be doing anybody a service if we were starting from anywhere else.
Absolutely. And you can still do the coaching virtually now, right? Or is it still exclusively virtual?
Is both.
Both,
so
okay.
yeah, so there's digital exercises and work that you can do that is virtually, and then you can go to CapitalOne.com and be able to, or go into one of our cafes and sign up for a session in person.
Awesome. So there's really no excuse to not do it. Maybe we should do it again. I love that. Well, this has been a great conversation. Anything else you want to leave our audience with aligning your spending with your values, Money and Life program that Capital One provides, or any other benefit?
Yeah, well, I mean, we love to connect with the listeners and with other consumers. So we definitely, check out CapitalOne.com and our mobile app. And if you go to CapitalOne.com/local, there's locations of our different branches and cafes if you're interested in getting closer to one of our coaches.
And good coffee and pastries.
Yes. And good coffee and pastries for sure.
Well, thank you so much, Adam, for coming on the show today. We really appreciate all that Capital One does for the podcast, and we appreciate your time as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Start your journey to financial independence with a checking and savings account that doesn't nickel and dime you with fees. Get a Capital One 360 checking or 360 performance savings account at Capital One today.
Thank you, Adam, for a great interview, and for Capital One for continuing to sponsor this show for the benefit of the LGBTQ+ community. Thank you to you, our listeners and viewers, for joining us for another podcast episode. Here's your Queer Money takeaway from this one. Take Adam's advice, click the link in your podcast player or the description of this video to learn more about Capital One's free Money and Life program. You don't need to be a Capital One customer to take it.
Then join us this Thursday when we talk about the most affordable LGBTQ+ friendly city to live in our former state of Nevada. And next Tuesday, when we talk with journalist Toby Salinger to follow up on Queer Money Podcast episode 386 about how donor advised funds are being used to target the LGBTQ+ community. Thank you and have a great week.
you.